like in the city where you have
Ooh, doggy, when your movie is so impeccably framed that it looks like GTA.
Hey, what are you watching?
Zodiac. I'm back on my film head shit, you see.
How is it? I'm a bit of a Fincher freak as well.
Oh, it's great. I've been on a real journalism biopic kick. You know, I love the process, the puzzles, the obstacles, the politics. Mark Ruffalo.
Stands to reason you'd enjoy films about journalism, given what you do with all your time.
What do you mean?
In some circles, what you do could by the narrowest definition be considered journalism.
I never thought about it that way. I guess in some sense, the YouTuber, certainly one with a substantial following and influence, would, I guess, bear some kind of responsibility, have a similar code of ethics seen in other mediums, such as print, required of them, an obligation to portray the truth.
Yeah.
Then again, I dropped out of school twice and I'm talking to a robot dog.
Fair.
Oh, that reminds me, I got my bush all sorted this year. Gotta plug this bad boy in.
Your work?
My solstice bush. I tell you, you got a lot to learn about the humans. Oh, fuck!
Power fluctuation detected. I suggest you shut down the bush.
What? No way, this is important.
Override accepted. Diverting power from toilet.
Thank you. Wait, does that mean I can't use the toilet?
Yes.
It's powered?
Yes.
So what, it won't flush now?
No.
It works like that?
Yes.
I guess I'm out of questions. Thank you for answering them.
Let's go.
Michigan, or Michigan Report from Hell, is a first-person horror adventure game and mid-2000s E3 attendance simulator. It was developed by Grasshopper Manufacture and published by Spike Co. Limited for the PlayStation 2 in 2004, and then by 505 Game Street in Europe and Australia a year later. A US release was proposed to Sony but turned down due to its sparse gameplay elements. Grasshopper Manufacture is synonymous with the work of eccentric video game auteur Goichi Suda, or Suda51, and Michigan is an early entry in his oeuvre, before he'd become a niche gamer household name with titles like Killer 7 and No More Heroes. He's a creator with a distinct voice, and even if one of his games isn't that great, there is usually merit to its novelty. At the very least, you can probably say that you haven't played a game quite like that before. However, I don't think it would be a stretch to say that Michigan is a bit of an outlier in Grasshopper's library. For starters, it's the only outright horror game from the studio, a genre that Suda has openly expressed disinterest in. It also has a particularly bleak, nihilistic tone, and while the game does feature Suda's signature off-kilter writing and body sense of humor, I'm not certain just how involved he actually was in the game's writing or development. Archived internet rabbit hole evidence suggests that he may have been distracted by work on Killer 7 and forced to take on more of a peripheral role with Michigan. The credits list him as being responsible for the original plan/edit, which is vague enough to mean it was either all his idea, or he scribbled a stick figure drawing of a man pointing a video camera up a woman's skirt on a napkin. The director is listed as Akira Ueda, and two writers are credited in Nobuhiko Sagara and Ren Yamazaki. All three appear to have joined Grasshopper originally to work on different aspects of the Shining Soul RPG series. The two Shining Souls titles and Michigan were, according to an interview with Suda in 2016, more or less contract work. Projects taken on in collaboration with their publishers in an attempt to keep Grasshopper afloat after their first two original titles undersold, and their planned third was cancelled after a year of work. The initial plan for Michigan was to quite literally use the Stephen King novella The Mist as an outline. Pretty early on, the devs felt they weren't capable of crafting something effectively creepy with their resources and experience, so this idea was to be influenced by found footage horror, putting the player in the role of a local news cameraman that can only observe and document the carnage of a supernatural disaster, with the morality or immorality of your journalistic zeal being a central theme to the narrative, further exemplifying how out of the loop Suda must have been during this game's development. In a 2008 interview with a very real-sounding UK gaming magazine, Computer and Video Games, he was asked if his game No More Heroes took place in the same universe as Michigan, which led to him in that moment learning that the game was in fact ported overseas 3 years prior, according to this parenthetical. I saw this bit of trivia repeated across several different platforms, and it is both a fun anecdote and an understandable excuse to distance Suda from a game that is simply not very good. Every beloved studio has, at least one game that needs to be chained up in the attic. For every Alan Wake, there is a Crossfire. For every Warcraft 3, there is a Warcraft 3 Reforged. For every The Elder Scrolls 3 Morrowind, there is a rest of the games Bethesda made. But I do think this is the only source for that story. And weirdly, when this interview was republished after CVG became Games Radar, the parenthetical was removed, awkwardly leaving Suda's response as no. There's a possibility he then forgot this because in a 2020 interview he did with NoClip, he refers to Killer 7 as the studio's first game to be released overseas. Despite this, he has expressed interest in not a remaster or a re-release of the game, but a from-the-ground-up remake of the concept in VR. Something he felt encouraged to do after he watched the 2007 film Wreck, and was essentially like, yeah, I guess that's what I was going for with my napkin doodle. On initial release, Michigan sold fairly well and by all accounts was reviewed quite decently by critics. I would show you, but I found no evidence of such things. What there is a record of is the Japanese marketing campaign, which featured a prevalent collaboration with a Taiwanese model, singer, and former wrestler named Yinling of Joy Toy. Here she is facing off against another wrestler named Hard Gay. So if you were wondering if Japanese wrestling was superior to American, yeah. She appears in several print ads, a short live-action film recreating bits of the game, and has a noticeable presence within the game itself, showing up in a New Game Plus level, where even though I don't speak the language, I can tell they gave her a Simpson-style celebrity cameo introduction. Wait a minute, is that noted triple threat Yinling?
What? Yinling? Yinling-da!
Due to a rights issue, and I'm guessing an issue of her not being as well known in the West, Yinling's involvement was omitted entirely from Michigan Report from Hell. One of few remaining scraps left in the European version is a poster of her, which you can interact with, but fittingly, none of the characters seem to know who she is. A year later, Michigan Report from Hell didn't fare as well for a number of reasons. X-Play would complement the game's innovative ideas, but express discomfort with the game's tone and sexual content, writing, "Michigan wants you to explore your dark side, but it might be a little too eager." Inversely, official PlayStation 2 magazine UK found very little to praise, dragging its writing, gameplay, and voice acting, as well as spending a fair deal of their coverage maligning the lack of promised erotic content. We're feeling massively shortchanged at the lack of eroticism. Keep in mind, this is a UK gaming rag from the 2000s, so it was also comprised of like 80% ads for Family Guy ringtones and 1-800 hotlines. In the years since, the work of Suda51 has garnered a considerable following in the West, leading to more and more new fans diving back into Grasshopper's library and likely arriving at the oddity that is Michigan, probably looking up footage to gauge their interest and then just opting to watch their favorite internet personality play through it while giggling. There's no way Suda could have foreseen this outcome, but it turns out Michigan is sort of the perfect game for the internet, thanks to the passivity of the gameplay, the absurdity of your goals, and of course being chock full of unusual, memorable quotables.
Hey, cameraman, do you like this kind of stuff?
Hey! What's the matter with...
Also the hidden gem quality of it, a weird little discarded idea from a now beloved studio. It's wonderful, if a bit tired territory for wringing content out of. So, I'm sure I don't have to tell you that the game called Michigan is set in the state of Illinois, and the city of Chicago to be exact, amidst a bizarre supernatural event wherein the city is draped in a thick fog, from which bizarre creatures have been emerging. A 3-person team from the ZaKaTV network is tasked with entering this hostile disaster area and acquiring compelling scoops to beam off to a fascinated public, going against the evacuation orders of the government that are keeping a tight lip on what's causing this nightmare. This team consists of an as of yet unnamed cameraman, a sound engineer named Jean-Philippe Briscoe, and a reporter named Pamela Martel. There is a brief gameplay tutorial that is additionally interesting because, aside from teaching you the mechanics of the game, it teaches you about how morality will affect the course of your playthrough. In the first example, Pamela has a little walk and talk with you, where you're filming her walk backwards, and you can see a wooden board rapidly approaching, and you have the option of warning her or staying quiet and letting her trip over it. The vast majority of video games assume, often falsely, that you are a good person that is interested in more than self-preservation and gratification. But this game often makes it clear that the right thing to do isn't always the most interesting. So if you act as the Boy Scout and prevent Pamela from falling, she's grateful to an extent.
I can tell we're going to get along just fine. But if you hadn't warned me about that board, you might have gotten a little scoop on me.
The team begins their first news segment on the streets of Chicago. Almost immediately, a blood-covered woman emerges from the fog, pleading for help.
What happened?
It came through the...
Oh my...
Can you try one more time without swearing?
The crew runs a few yards away from this paranormal threat and takes a breather from the relative safety of a slightly different spatial location. Briscoe feebly attempts to calm Pamela down, which only enrages her. She then turns her anger towards our cameraman, chastising him for filming her in this moment of panic. This distracts her from the approaching monster that appears to swallow her whole. This sequence is a pretty good indication of what the tone of the rest of the game will be like. Recounting the plot of Michigan beyond its basic premise will require some embellishment, some liberties taken, because the impression I get is that Michigan was aiming to emulate the experience of being an investigative reporter, unraveling a high-reaching conspiracy through on-the-ground reporting, being in the thick of it, the malleable morality of the business, and not so much meant to tell one cohesive, clear narrative. I'm guessing that it doesn't intend to do that because it doesn't. What it does do is provide you with a directorial power. You sort of dictate what your reporter looks at or doesn't, which could lead you to find or miss information related to the supernatural events. You could save someone's life, be it a regular civilian caught in the chaos or your own reporter. Or you could keep rolling because if it bleeds, it leads.
Oh!
Look out! Yep, she's dead.
Pamela's death leaves a vacancy that is immediately filled by Ann Anderson. The gang traveled to a hotel to look for survivors, but found the place abandoned and littered with dead bodies. Suddenly, the opportunity for a scoop calls on the telephone. It's a person calling on the telephone. Ann runs over and speaks with a frightened girl that's stuck at the center building, looking for her parents. I don't know if that's meant to represent a real building in Chicago. I suppose it could be the Cultural Center building, which happens to be near Michigan Avenue, but in any case, we have some flimsy premise to go somewhere. Before that, we catch up with Briscoe, who's fallen into a bit of a drunken rut. In a rambling monologue, he reveals that he was in love with Pamela, has been for a long time, but was always too afraid to tell her. Anne gives him a little pep talk about honoring her legacy by finishing this story and eventually gets him back on board. Rest assured, this will not be the last time you hear Briscoe whining about Pamela's death. But don't think that just because a big to-do is made out of her death, that Anne has some kind of plot armor. I mean, it doesn't have to play out like this, but it could very well be the case that after Anne is introduced and talks Briscoe off a proverbial ledge, that we are tasked with finding him some water to sober up with, which we find in a little convenience store in the hotel. Unfortunately, we also find a big scary spider that could simply drop on Anne and kill her instantly. The wild thing is, this does not lead to a fail state. Anne is dead, and any plot threads she took part in along with her. But the story continues, and she too is replaced with another reporter, this time named Carly Reese. Okay, haha, very funny. Your first two lead characters can meet laughably fast demises. Let's take this seriously now and really dive into this story, you might be saying, stupidly. What if I told you that Carly could die just as easily, and even her replacement, and then her replacement's replacement? This could happen. Or you could roundhouse kick Anne out of the path of the spider and carry on playing a good chunk of the game with this character as your main reporter. Your inaction can several times over lead to your reporter's death, and the game just finds a reason for a new one to show up. And there is a surprising amount of consideration in the logic of this. Each of the reporters is a character of their own with a distinct personality and content of their own, and the dialogue is adjusted to accommodate that. Okay, I'm realizing I didn't preface the fact that the game wants you to do stuff like this. I know that sounds like I'm lying, but you're gonna see a lot of footage of me doing this. But in this time, I mean it. This is part of the game. I'm supposed to do this. And, you know, I usually lie when people ask me what I do. Where Pamela was a bit of an entitled jerk, Anne is more serious, devoted to her job in a cold, unfeeling way. She's a bit of an ice queen, craving compelling content even if it means not helping others. She is a noticeably different person when compared to the other reporters, but what does seem to unify all of them is that they're all, like, sociopaths.
Oh my god! What is it? Did you get that?
I don't imagine you'll be sympathizing with many of the characters in Michigan or becoming attached to them. These aren't heroes, they're gawkers. Vultures showing up when really a rescue was needed.
It's a huge scoop.
We've already got more than enough footage of people being eaten.
This callous tone, this rarely seen dark reflection of a business rife with real-life monsters, this is what I'm intrigued by. The little novelty I can't say I've seen elsewhere, but I couldn't tell you just how much thought went into the idea. Was this a conscious decision meant to grimly satirize, sensationalize news, and our relationship with the truth and violence on TV? Or was it simply pulp, an excuse to make a violent adult game that rewards you for filming dead bodies and women bending over? There's a really funny interview with Suda from Gamasutra, in which the interviewer presents their theory on Michigan's meaning. He posits that the game is really a sort of meta-commentary on voyeurism, and the way we've distanced ourselves emotionally from the people and the violence on our screens. Vicariously. We live while the whole world dies. You all feel the same, so... To which Suda responds, well, I didn't think that deeply into it. Which is a great moment that probably should have been left alone, but the interviewer then doubles down on this by ruminating on how that's the great thing about art. A creator can have a certain meaning ascribed to it, and an audience can have a totally different interpretation of it. To which he responds, art?
Art is expression. Expression, I say.
Let's presume you did the honorable thing and either kicked Anne, or you pointed at the spider and said, oh look out, there's a spider, thus allowing our tenuous protagonist further screen time. Before leaving, the gang is attacked by a big monster that weaponizes little insect creatures that your reporter can shoot at. She has a gun. Actually, all the reporters are armed and crack shots, which is great considering the circumstances. Just an odd little detail left unremarked on. On the way to the center building, the gang stops to investigate a crashed ZaKaTV van and finds a seemingly alive Pamela. Briscoe is momentarily ecstatic that the love of his life is still alive, only she don't look so good. She's unresponsive and then begins to vomit giant worms and then like, starts crawling after us. First. They take refuge inside a nearby office building. A weird bit of confusion crops up in the scene because Anne says,
I bet she tried to get away, but couldn't.
He's dead.
I mean, it's just like a flayed body, so I guess it would make sense that they couldn't immediately make heads or tails of it. Either way, it ends up contributing to the unsympathetic lens we're watching through. Don't matter what you are, we're just looking for meat.
Hey, you. You better be getting this on tape.
Demon Pamela manages to crawl her way into the building, but some quick thinking sees her crushed by a security shutter. Briscoe, for a third time, deals with his unresolved and unrequited incel-adjacent feelings for Pamela. Which, look, maybe I'm getting too much in character at this point, but by now it's becoming a lot. I get that you cared about her, but, like, look, these reporters just kind of spawn out of crashed news vans, so, like, we'll get you a new one. I will say, possibly by sheer force of his performance, Briscoe is almost likable. He's the closest to being likable, even though he spends the length of the game dramatically moping about the death of this woman, who could barely even be considered a friend, really, yet he keeps photos of her and writes her poetry, something he should continue developing, but for sure, he is responsible for all the best moments in the game, probably.
God damn it! I'll never forget you, Pamela.
Including my favorite moment, in which your crew is camped out for the night in a cabin. So of course we have the option of sneaking in and filming either Briscoe or your reporter in the shower. If you choose to creep on Briscoe, you of course are caught with awkward comedic results and then chewed out by him. The thing is, it's surprisingly gentle for the era it comes from. The violation of privacy sort of gets superseded by Briscoe coming to terms with his partner being gay. Maybe this was sillier in the Japanese script, but in this one, he seems to genuinely do his best to be an ally. Display that his lifestyle is his business, yet also makes clear that you've crossed a boundary and that's why he's upset. It's the most mature thing in one of the most juvenile games I've played 4 times in a row. Assuming you didn't let Pamela eat Anne, you'll show up at the center building and start doing coverage. Filming B-roll. I mean, we're working, right? You gotta set the scene for the horror. They make contact with the girl that called them back in the hotel, Becky, and seem to be in no rush to get to her, making triple assurances that she knows to wait there and not move. They are so dead set on her not moving that, like, a case could be made, they played a role in her mauling death at the hands of the fog mutants. So that's it. You know, the reason we came here is now deleted from the story, so I guess we leave. That's sort of the way many levels in this game work. They just kind of stop without a clear resolution. It's borderline anthological. After being attacked by the same creature that ate their scoop, the crew decides to head back to the office and regroup. If you chose to not film Becky's death out of respect for her or some shit, Anne and Briscoe will bicker with each other on the way out about missing the scoop of a lifetime.
We've got to keep on shooting to the end. That's the duty of a journalist. That's what Becky would want too, I'm sure. Make sure you get this on film.
Is that blood on your shirt?
I don't think so.
As you can probably tell, we've learned nothing new about the fog, its function, its cause, how to combat it, why we can't see it. That's one of the weird quirks of Report from Hell. They, for whatever reason, decided to nix the fog effect that shows up whenever enemies are around. So even in scenes when they comment on the fog, there is no fog.
Wow, there's even fog in here.
What's with this fog? It's really creepy.
The small consolation is that you can find vague blurbs and periodicals that don't so much illuminate what's happening, so much as place pieces on the board. Proffer up concepts that you can fill in the blanks with. Newspapers with headlines like, String of disappearances around Michigan. A new strain of influenza rages through the area. Army plans full-scale maneuvers on the shores of Lake Michigan. Books with titles like Bacteria and Extinction. Emails and notes left between mysterious figures D and M seem to have some idea of what's going on, referencing members of ZaKaTV and something called Gagny. Somewhere deep down, if I were to obsessively pore over the documents, cross-reference blurbs, chug coffee and chain smoke, I could probably find a coherent narrative about corporate overreach and science gone too far. But as is, I got half the cipher worked out and can guess the rest. Like, yeah, super soldier program, next step of evolution, yada yada yada. I'm just trying to get spooked out here. But as a horror game, Michigan is kind of incompetent. It's like they knew what a scary moment in film looked like, but had no idea when one was effective or not, when it was earned or forced. More often than not, when something scary was meant to be happening, I was too distracted by a stream of rapid-fire questions to react properly.
I'm from ZaKaTV, and
What was that? Why did it do that? Was that person already dead? Did their head just explode? Did someone shoot them from off screen? Is it part of the transformation that the head explodes? Why did Anne try to talk to a clearly dead person? Are they dead now? Did one of us shoot this man? Were they dead? Am I dead now?
This is one video game you won't be playing for a while. Lewis Young, Channel 7, Eyewitness News.
It's actually really strange that some of the more effective, creepy moments in this game are the result of these ghostly figures and haunted dolls that are planted throughout levels. It's kind of effective how they're always there, but you don't really notice them until you sweep your camera past them, like a little Easter egg jump scare. But that's also just all they are. I didn't find anything in the game that would explain why these paranormal phenomena crop up in this decidedly sci-fi horror story, other than to crank up the moment-to-moment spookiness and obfuscate what the threat we're investigating even is. I guess I could headcanon that this is just the mounting delusions of our mute cameraman, slowly losing it as the scoops keep slipping through his fingers, and his aspirations of one day owning the company seem more and more distant. If you'd like to experience this game's story on your own, feel free to skip to this time, where I will summarize my feelings on this game's plot. But really, I know why you're here. Look, I'll put on the little song and dance for you, but just know I know, okay? I'll just give you a minute to consider, to mouse on over to that timestamp like I know you're gonna do.
Building's closed on Sunday.
Oh boy, you really stepped in it now, Annie.
What are you watching now?
Shattered Glass.
Oh, what's it about?
Aren't you, like, connected to Wikipedia?
Oh, so you'd prefer to sit in silence for another week?
This one is about a hotshot young journalist that apparently lied about most of his stories. Like, he just made up scenarios and characters whole cloth until some guy at Forbes fact-checked one of his articles.
How does it compare to Zodiac?
Very different vibes. Incomparable, really. Though this one also has Chloe Sevigny.
Oh, cool. Wait, that wasn't believable. Oh, cool.
Hey, just so you know, I know what you're doing, and thanks. It's been difficult, especially around the holidays. Hopefully I get a call from the Holiday Man, his representative.
The what?
You know, the Holiday Man for the Solstice Ascension. Don't you know anything? What, I gotta explain this to you?
I can find no record of this combination of words.
You know what, man? Everyone's afraid of AI taking over the world and shit. But in the end, you're only as smart as the biggest collection of morons. Holiday Man's representative is going to call me on the holiday phone, so I can requisition a holiday gift following my sacrifice of flesh, blood, and peppermint. What are you doing?
Scanning you for signs of demonic possession.
Okay, rude. At the ZaKaTV office, it appears the rest of your coworkers have been evacuated. Your reporter needs to change their clothes. Sorry. I'm just laughing because she doesn't. We all know she doesn't need to change her clothes. She looks great. But okay. If you've kept Anne alive, there is of course a sequence where you can creep on her changing, but it's a real lose-lose scenario. Somehow, a monster has made it into the room with her, and you have the option of warning her that there is a monster behind her, or continuing to film her change and eventually be killed by the monster. Obviously, it would be rude to not only film her changing, but not warn her about the monster. I've got nothing against Anne. I wouldn't take pleasure in her demise, so that lingering bit of empathy within me leapt into action and chose to say, oh Anne, look out. But she's still rightfully pissed off that you were there filming in the first place. So it's kind of a hollow rescue. Then there is like the option of you could never even approach the door, so you never have to make that choice. But then what about the monster? if you do let the monster eat her, it's kind of funny that all that's left of her is like a puddle of blood and some underwear. That's what it's all about, isn't it, you freaks? Also, this isn't entirely my fault, right? Like, if I had let her die, Briscoe gives me shit about it. But where was he? I'm not the boss here, I'm just a soulless husk with a camera. I'm the true embodiment of journalism, okay? It's not my job to intervene. Another phone call gives us a lead on a scoop. There's an old man trapped in a nursing home. Anne is curiously invested and seems to genuinely want to help this man, seeing as though the police and rescue services have already evacuated. Briscoe has no interest in going and drags the truth out of Anne. That, well, it sounds like a good story. It's kind of weird seeing them, I don't want to say learning empathy, but like seeing how to emulate it, because they know that good stories involve empathy. So they're like, wow, if we really cared about this old man, it would be a great story.
You just want a good story, that's all.
Maybe so.
Instead of an old man, we find Justine Rhodes, another ZaKaTV reporter tied to a pool table. She was at the office and was knocked out by a mystery attacker and woke up here. This whole level really stands out amongst the rest because it's maybe the only one that seems to operate under heavily manufactured video game logic. All the challenges of it don't make real-world sense. The way you free Justine from her restraints is by placing the pool balls on the table in the order they appear on this poster. But there's just, I mean, put yourself in this scenario. Your friend is tied to a table. She has no idea how she got there. All we know is she's there, and there are some weird shackles that don't seem to have any obvious means of undoing. How many things would you try before walking around the house to find the missing balls and arrange them on the table in a specific order? When would you get to the point where that would be a thing that even crossed your mind?
I don't like the way that chandelier is swaying.
You're right. It could fall any minute.
If it does fall, it'll crash right onto Justine.
We've got to hurry.
I'm gonna be honest, guys, I'm having trouble understanding the urgency in this situation. I mean, sure, the chandelier could fall on Justine. I get that you want me to prevent that from happening, but I also feel like you didn't put the work in to make that a viable concern. And if that does happen, I can't really be blamed for it, because it's a profoundly silly thing to happen. After Justine is saved, if you've saved her, everyone argues about the old man they received the call from. There is seemingly no sign of the dude that drew all these people here. I mean, there's a dead guy upstairs with a pool ball shoved down his throat, but it's irrelevant. That was part of a puzzle, you see. Briscoe theorizes that the call could have been a trap. Someone may have intentionally lured ZaKaTV there to kill them. God, we're really just groping around in the dark with this one. Everything's overly complicated. I had to do a pool ball puzzle to free our friend here. Now we gotta find a way out of here. I'm sure that's gonna be it. Oh, hey, a key. Well, here I was complaining. All I had to do was look down at my goddamn feet. Oop, getting a calling to. Now that it's clear that ZaKaTV employees are being targeted, the crew starts to consider just evacuating like the rest of the city has. Justine is sure most of their coworkers have already left Chicago, but there are still a few teams unaccounted for, such as one that was sent to the old Miller family mansion to investigate a monster sighting. Briscoe once again drags his feet in pursuit of a scoop when all he wants to do is GTFO. Get that figured out. At this mansion, we find team director Christian on the brink of death. In his final moments, he hints that Zaka, the corporation that owns ZaKaTV, may have something to do with the outbreak. Another reporter named Jeff might know more, as he's the chief's favorite. This is the only character that receives something of a respectable, dramatic death. In his last moments, he asks that his wife be told that he's gone deep undercover for the biggest scoop of his life. This almost effectively emotional death is of course immediately undercut when anyone else starts talking.
No! You can't die!
He's already dead. Let's go!
A big source of, I wouldn't say exposition so much as reminders of the game's basic premise, occurs between levels where we see the cameraman's log of events as the characters talk over these prompts. Sometimes these can last a good while and dip into borderline radio play territory. I actually enjoyed this idea, and some of the sound design behind them, but their utility is sort of redundant and nothing all that interesting ever really develops from them, mostly consisting of a lot of, what do you think we'll find there? This whole situation is pretty crazy, huh? You thought Pamela was pretty too, right? Do you think she liked me? Do you think she could have ever liked me? Do you like me? The gang heads over to St. Matthew's Church, where Jeff was last seen. You know, usually when a Japanese game is set in the US, they make some effort to recreate at least one landmark or bit of architecture, but I'm realizing this game is really just set in Chicago in name only. I mean, I'm sure there is a St. Matthew's Church in Chicago, but I'm also sure there are probably a few of them, and none of them are this grand, gothic place with a suspended cherub. It's probably like a dingy converted office with like this stained foam board tile ceiling and, you know, a little fold out table with some donuts on it. The one thing I miss about forced Catholicism. The donuts. After defeating the transformed Jeff, Anne is feeling pretty overwhelmed about killing at least 2 of her co-workers. The severity of the circumstances becoming too much to bear. For a moment, guilt appears to seep in, empathy, but it's quickly discarded. She's actually fine, so fine that she's gonna go off on her own for a while. It's possible for other reporters to do this same scene, and each one gives a sort of flimsy excuse to temporarily leave the group. I think because the following chapter is like a self-contained vignette that requires one specific character, I wouldn't worry about her safety. Reporters are kind of OP in this world, as they've figured out how to carry 2 objects instead of one of which being a gun. Briscoe and the cameraman decide to visit the ZaKaTV headquarters to give the chief, Deborah Flair, a piece of their mind. They were sent running into a threat they didn't understand, and now half their staff is dead, and the time clock doesn't work properly, so they keep getting dinged for unapproved overtime, but they wrote a post-it denoting the actual time they clocked out, but it fell off, and then somebody walked over it, and it stuck to the bottom of their shoe. On the way to ZaKaTV headquarters, Briscoe is unable to see through the dense fog and winds up crashing their van. In a sequence we don't see, the two wander around in the mountains for a while, and they stumble on a seemingly abandoned campsite. I guess the headquarters must have been pretty far from the city, like over 6 hours out, because I don't know where they found mountains to wander around in when we just came from downtown Chicago. Are we in Wisconsin now? Where have you taken me? By an astounding coincidence, as they pull up to this lodge, they find a woman named Nina passed out on the stoop. She wakes up and recognizes that we're with ZaKaTV because her boyfriend Dwight works there. She was supposed to meet him at this cabin, but she must have been clubbed over the head or something because she doesn't know what happened after she got here. They decide to wait a little longer for Dwight to show up and rest up in the meantime.
Until then, we should each take a room and relax and try to get our strength back. You must be tired too, Nina. Why don't you take a shower or something?
Yes, all right. I guess I will.
I don't know about you, but I don't know what scenario I'd feel comfortable telling a woman I met 2 minutes ago, why don't you take a shower? I feel like he said this while wink wink nudging the cameraman.
Hey, film this. Get this on video so we can air it on the local news. They'll give us a fucking Pulitzer.
After everyone showers in 3 separate showers at the same time for some reason, something thuds upstairs and Nina runs up there to find Dwight dead. There isn't any dialogue suggesting it, but it's clear that he wasn't eaten by a monster or something. It looks like he was simply shot in the head. In a voiceover interstitial, the cameraman and Nina walk down the road to find her car. Briscoe stays behind because he's feeling dizzy, and Nina for a moment seems to imply that Briscoe could be a murderer. She finds it odd that he didn't seem to care about finding Dwight dead, ironically saying this while showing an impressive amount of indifference to her boyfriend's death.
Look, here's a shotgun. You might not know it to look at me, but I'm pretty good with a gun. As long as we have this, we can feel safe, huh?
Boy, they kinda got our number as Americans though, huh? Back at the cabin, Briscoe says he's doing a lot better, in that tone exclusive to those who are hiding they've been bitten by a zombie. As they turn to leave, a monster bursts through the floorboards and attacks them, and for no reason, Nina's character takes an astounding turn and does one of the most confusingly badass things I've seen in a game.
I've still got some bullets left. I'll make this thing blow up from inside.
Wait, I don't think that's how that works. They're just shotgun shells. Unlike most other points in the game, this is a fixed event that always plays out this way, so unfortunately, the coolest lead character is scripted to die here, making this level seem all the more strange. It had to have been either an afterthought, or somebody just really liked this sequence and didn't want to allow for the possibility of skipping it, despite it being the most easily deletable level. Nothing about the story would really change were it not here. Your reporter just goes to off somewhere for a while, you do this, and then you just meet back up with them. And yet somehow, Michigan would be noticeably worse without it. Just to examine the interesting ways that Grasshopper compromised with this plot that could play out with numerous different characters, once you step out of the elevator in the ZaKaTV headquarters, you're greeted by whichever was the last living reporter, and they all parrot a somewhat similar explanation for what they were up to in your absence that mad-libs in different words.
I couldn't find Jonesy, though. I'm a little worried about him.
Jonesy?
Jonesy's our puppy.
I'm worried about Jonesy. He wasn't there.
Jonesy?
Yes, our cat.
But Jonesy wasn't there either. I'm worried.
Jonesy?
Our pet rabbit.
Oh, okay.
That's not to say all the changes are that shallow, and this next scene exemplifies how different the same scene can feel with each reporter. Everyone storms into Deborah's office to confront her about this doomed quest for scoops. Let her know how bad it is out there, how they're killing our guys.
Just shut up and listen. And listen good, Chief. I, Jean-Philippe Briscoe, say this as a representative of all ZaKaTV.
Oh shit, I thought he was about to start rapping. He had a real rhythm going there. The same basic thing happens, but each reporter reacts a bit differently according to their personality type. The gist of it is, your reporter attempts to unload on the chief, but for whatever reason, both her and Briscoe are too intimidated and subservient to her to actually commit and go through with their plans to hang up the boom mic and evacuate. Justine is sort of the exception because in the moment, she realizes she doesn't actually have a problem with their treatment and is just worried about looking like she questioned Deborah's leadership when she hadn't.
It was like I couldn't go against her, you know? Didn't you feel the same way?
Yes. Whatever the chief asks me to do, I feel like I really have to give it my all.
Yes, I guess I did.
Not especially.
With their momentary lapse into self-respect and empathy for their fellow man evaporated, the crew is somewhat emboldened to not only go back into the field, but to give it their all and find the best goddamn scoops this network has ever seen. ZaKaTV is depicted in that same uncanny sort of way that David Lynch thinks the FBI operates, like it's a dream of a cartoon of itself. There's a weird unspoken honor behind this incredibly dangerous, mean-spirited, unorganized, probably low-paying gig that everyone takes deadly serious. This sort of logic appears in a lot of Japanese games depicting the United States, and I honestly love that. The closer Japanese games get to actually rendering my country, the less interesting I'll probably find it. Even though Suda has confirmed that Michigan is not a canon installment in an expanded universe, ZaKaTV might be, as reference to it does appear in other Grasshopper manufactured games like No More Heroes and Killer 7. In fact, there's a Japan-only lore book for that game that goes into absurd detail about the origins of the group and its parent company, Ishizaka Corporation, confirming that the broadcasting studio began in 1980 Chicago and was controversial for its devotion to finding hot scoops in lieu of ethics. I guess that's more of a Mark Frost move to think it necessary to create a lore book for your impenetrably esoteric dreamscape. After that embarrassing failure of a confrontation, Deborah explains that in 5 hours, the military will be showing up at a nearby airport to evacuate all the stragglers in Chicago, something she organized personally thanks to her high-reaching connections. But she holds this possibility of rescue as leverage to get the team to help her out with one last loose end, rescuing a ZaKaTV guy named Glenn. He's being held captive in a research room at the Von Erich Library, though she refuses to expand on why this person was detained at all and why it was at a library of all places. When we get there, our reporter gets reporting, setting the scene for what is intended to be a staged, visually engaging rescue of their coworker.
It seems to be a perfectly ordinary room. There's a desk, and a few other things here and there.
Wow, you guys are just really struggling for content here, huh? Okay.
I was sleeping, dreaming about graham crackers, and next thing I know, ice and toilet paper and everything else ran into me, and I ran into the wall.
For a moment, it looks like we might actually save a single soul in this compendium of bungles.
It opened! Glenn! Are you alright? I'm Justine Rhodes from ZaKaTV. We came to rescue you.
Glenn? Buddy? You alright? Glenn.
A journal left on his corpse implies that he may have been killed because he knew too much. About what, I do not know, for he is slain. In any case, he had planned to meet up with someone named Dr. O'Connor at Club Gochi. So, guess where we're going? Club Gochi's power was out, so even though the guy that might know the answers to all our questions about the fog and the viruses there, it would be too dark to film, so it's useless for the scoop. The gang instead heads over to a local pawn shop to find an infrared attachment for our camera. And they do. How are they not completely demoralized by now? I mean, I don't know how valuable the scoops we've scooped up have been. We have no interviews, no man on the street segments, just disjointed clips of us standing over corpses and saying, "Yep, are you sure we're not just producing a Faces of Death tape? Can we do bum fights or Girls Gone Wild instead?" Don't get me wrong, I'm out here to exploit someone for sure. I'm out here to make watching TV with your dad late at night real uncomfortable. Using the infrared camera, we're able to get the lights in Club Gochi on, and this mysterious Dr. O'Connor is really chill about just hanging back while we get all our coverage out of the way.
I'm Carly Reese from ZaKaTV. Our news team came here especially to find you.
What in the world are you talking about? You're making absolutely no sense.
Hey, come on, we're making some sense. We've acknowledged your name and said who we are, and said we're looking for you. I mean, we're not in the Black Lodge right now. Dr. O'Connor continues to deny any knowledge of what's causing the fog and the mutations, but once he learns that Glenn is dead, he gives up the most exposition you're going to find in this game in a real tone. He says the fog was caused by the joint research of the military, the government, and Zaka Group, the parent company our little network belongs to. Zaka owns the patent to some kind of gene manipulation tech, and I guess this is what that does. This whole disaster was a failed attempt at testing this tech as a bioweapon. It's a virus called Gagny that this guy created and is currently infected with. How it got distributed all over Chicago, I do not know. Thankfully, there is a vaccine, but it was carted off by the military who stole all the research. I actually really like how bloodthirsty these little ghouls can be.
You film him, okay? Are you getting this?
Not only is her first instinct to make sure I film this guy's Lovecraftian demise, she wants to be in the shot, giving play-by-play commentary. Okay, he's writhing around in pain now. Okay, he's pissing his pants now. Lots and lots of piss. Get a shot of the piss. The only lead wrung from our run-in with Dr. O'Connor is that the military was transferring the research and lab animals via the Grant Park train station. So let's head on over to the all together now. So, despite having one concrete lead, everyone suddenly seems very concerned about a Zaka employee named Robert Adonis. Briscoe especially. This is another scenario like the Lodge that is one of the more interesting vignettes in the game, but similarly very flimsily shoehorned in. It's the strangest hodgepodge. It's as though the game were written after the fact. A collection of sequences, some of which pretty interesting, strung together by interstitial dialogue. Especially so with this one, with a big asterisk. If you're with the reporter Carly, there's the extra wrinkle that Adonis, the fellow we're suddenly meant to be looking for, is Carly's boyfriend. And even she doesn't seem to think it's necessary to check in on him, but Briscoe is pretty adamant about it.
I'm sure Robbie will be fine. We should go to the station first.
You think? I don't know. I'm worried about him. Let's go help him out.
You show up to whatever the Forest building is. They seem to know what that is, so they don't have an explainer for me. I can't even come up with what that would be. I just keep picturing a Panera bread that's been reclaimed by nature. As it should be. Anyways, the highlight of this scene is finding Adonis hiding in a locker. Briscoe attempts to goad him out, but this guy is clearly infected with the virus and feebly attempts to get them to shut up and run away because he's about to shit himself inside out or whatever. But everyone in the game is not only a psycho, but also a complete Nimrod.
What are you doing hiding in there?
Don't come near me!
What are you talking about? We came looking for you, man!
Idiots!
All the other reporters react to this situation like you'd expect. They just shoot him. But Carly, in one of the most fucked up and weird moments in the game, just runs into his arms and embraces him. Even as flesh slugs are seeping from his face to eat her, she tells him she loves him, and he, still becoming an eldritch hellspawn, manages to murmur, "I love you too." It's actually a really fun scene in a game that never tries this hard to be subversive and whimsical, and the odds are pretty high that you won't even see it. If you do decide to let Carly die here, they just happen upon another crashed ZaKaTV van and find your 5th replacement reporter, Paula Orton, just wandering around in the fog. But it's like the same scene with the character models swapped out, because I'm sure that saved like a day or two they could spend dreaming up new things to put on the ground for the reporter to slowly pick up, and then just decide to go with a key again.
It's a key!
The train station stage is full of a lot of hard science behind the virus and a lot of walking. As we walk around filming for the scoop, there are numerous blood-spattered journals strewn about by figures involved with the virus and subsequent vaccine research, the pacing of which is kind of weird. The first of these you find just tells you the ingredients to make the vaccine on your own, but because you don't speak, you don't get involved, you don't go inside, you don't carry a gun, you camera. A dog like that one. You don't point that out to your buddies. We do a lot of running around and looking at various things, and then we find someone else's account of things that repeat the same ingredients, but this time around your reporter is paying attention, so they acknowledge it and make a plan to track them down. Another journal explains that the anti-Gagny vaccine can be loaded into special ammo that can be fired at both the infected and uninfected. So the thing that the vaccine can be made out of might be revealed to you here if you have the right reporter, but I kind of prefer there to be some build-up to the reveal. Rest assured, it's a very funny thing to put into bullets that you'd then fire into people preventatively. It was kind of a turning point for me where I think I began to contemplate how much of this game was meant to be funny, independent of the voice acting, which is more of an unforeseen consequence. It's the monkey's paw fate delivered to the well-meaning gamer that wished to see the game ported overseas. A film may have relegated this scene to a montage, where our heroes tear apart the local pharmacy looking for a specific mixture of chemicals, just trashing the joint, swiping bottles off shelves, you know, much like me when I need emergency, but they don't have it in the gummy form.
I need the gummies, I'll kill you!
But What actually happens is we walk down the aisles of a convenience store, finding nothing with the ingredients we need. That is, until we happen upon a warm, half-consumed can of sports drink that has every single goddamn one of them. The revelation that we are now meant to fill bullets with a commercially available sports drink and fire them at the infected, transformed or not, is funny enough to effectively rattle my read of this game's sense of humor. On some level, it doesn't surprise me that the solution to a deadly outbreak would be found not in a sterile lab lined with beakers bearing different colored fluids, but in the unpronounceable ingredients found in all our packaged snackies and drinks. I am kind of pissed off that we were deprived of any sequence where they worked out the mechanics of just how this Gatorade launcher would work.
Get blasted!
Looks like it has lots of ingredients we don't need in it too, though.
At this point, who cares?
That's actually a pretty apt way of summing up the third act of Michigan. The gang hits the road for the great Tezu Airport and their promised evacuation. Only it's a long enough drive for them to need to pull over somewhere and rest for the night. Interestingly, this is the only moment in the game with an immediate and clear branching path. You're left standing in a hallway with several doors you could head into. You could also snoop on what your buddies are muttering about in their sleep. Most of this is benign and silly me adjacent content, unless you have Paula in your group, the ordinarily squeamish and skittish reporter in her light pink trad reporter fit is having an interesting dream.
God damn it. I'm gonna kill you.
You know, ordinarily I'd be concerned about this, but I don't like the guy this game wants me to be, so... Look, I deserve everything I got coming to me. A price must be paid for my crimes. We were hired to cover the news, yet all I cared about was a zoom. You know, at the start of this video, I knew I wanted to reference this music video. My memory had protected me from just how creepy this shot is. What a cool guy thing to do. Whichever room you head into chooses a conclusion to this segment, and one of them is just like a miss. You just go to sleep and then wake up later and the night passes without incident. There's also one where you're woken up by a scary ghost. That still doesn't have an explanation. We have enough information to fill in the gaps concerning the virus, its purpose, its cause, its origin, but nobody's ready to talk about the man standing right behind you. You, listener. There's a man behind you right now. Don't look! You trying to get yourself killed? Oh, what do we do? What do we do? Oh, I got it. Another door leads to you being attacked by a monster, and you have to knock it into the fireplace to defeat it. Though I admit that's sort of a dramatization of what happened. Hey, buddy! Over here. There's something I need you to see over here. Hey! You want a little tree? Yeah. The last door leads to another morality decision where you can choose to prevent or allow the motel owner from eating a big sandwich. It's weird. None of these sequences work individually at achieving whatever emotion they are trying to achieve, but I see potential. I think you could reassemble this into something creepy. And you know, I hate to say it, but it might just be because it's like the longest you go without hearing the other characters speak.
It's the control for the shutter!
I see it.
In the game's last gasp, the boys and the surviving reporter show up at the empty airport, also blanketed in the same fog, and continue to report as they hope for a rescue. If you let all 5 of the reporters die, you'll be punished by having to use some guy named Mark. He's not a particularly interesting guy, but he's clearly the same class of asshole as most of the other characters. He shows up to the airport waiting for his girlfriend Nina to show up. Okay, you know, come to think of it, there are ways this story can play out that are sort of contradictory and weird. His girlfriend Nina is not the Nina we met earlier that was somehow made of dynamite. They just wrote in another character named Nina, and it's acknowledged by Briscoe. I guess I'm not sure why they didn't just name this character that is never seen with a different name. Unless this was somehow retrofitted into place with some seams showing. I hate to more on this later, but this comes up at the end, so additional information to come. In the airport's control room, we make contact with the military. They're going in circles up above because there's too much fog to see the runway. Nobody here knows how this complicated switchboard works, so they can't figure out how to flip on the runway lights. They compromise by saying they'll turn on the lighthouse beacon on the same island, and they can just land there. They all run over to the car and outside meet up with Deborah, and we're given the last morality QuickTime event. While she's yapping on... Sorry, that was real Doug Heffernan encoded of me. As she's inundating you with questions, something is creeping up behind her and you can choose to warn her or see how it plays out. Again, I don't know why you're the arbiter of what your group does in dangerous scenarios. Like, if I let her get eaten by a monster, sure, I didn't say anything, but neither did any of you. You all stood there and watched. Don't look at me like I am a monster. Frown on your one face, but with the other, the thing sneaking up behind her was what remains of Pamela after being wormified, split in half, and smushed by a door. She's been crab crawling across the state, following in our footsteps. Either way, you don't fight her or anything. She either eats Deborah and bails, or you know, raise your arm above your head to make yourself bigger and she scampers off. Right after this encounter, a very, very weird little guy appears. He's got a whiny, annoying voice. He's disheveled and behaving kind of like a child. He doesn't seem to be aware of what's happening in the world and inadvertently reveals that he was Dr. O'Connor's guinea pig. This is the titular Gagney. I think I'm still processing how I feel about this guy being what I guess passes for, you know, the final boss? The final challenge, at least? But I guess it's an interesting subversion. I feel like any other game would make Dr. O'Connor the guy at the end that gives some contrived speech about evolving beyond humanity and reaching some sort of perceived divinity by turning into a big phallic meat slug. But the game does that like an hour or two before you think it would. While Gagney runs around in circles screaming, your reporter, perhaps entirely out of annoyance, just casually uses him as target practice. Look how unfazed he is. He's just like that DoorDash driver that shot a TikTok prankster, just not quite as satisfying. And eventually he surrenders, pleading for his life. But it's not too long before he begins to transform. Not into a gross meat monster, he transforms into an explosion and dies.
For those who have already turned into monsters, the vaccine euthanizes them mercifully.
At the lighthouse, no matter which reporter you make it there with, they refuse to go on any further. They are just wiped out from the journey here and would prefer you and Briscoe flip on the beacon so they can vamoose. Thus begins the trek up the lighthouse steps. Along the way, Briscoe expresses that he doesn't trust the reporter. Any of them, doesn't matter. This whole bit doesn't really seem to change. He implies that they've always been the chief's favorite and probably know more than they're letting on. At the top of the lighthouse, he starts to feel sick and quickly begins to transform, briefly giving chase after the cameraman before leaping out of a window. So the next couple scenes are... no, that's right, it's actually over. That's the end of the game. Michigan truly ends at a point in a story. I don't know which point that is, but the credits start playing and my buttons stop doing what they used to do, suggesting that there was no more video game to play. There aren't really alternate endings to the game so much as alternate after credits videos. All of them involve the cameraman finally pointing the camera at himself and speaking. But based on how immoral, erotic, or suspenseful your camera work was, this will literally change the guy he is. I do find it amusing that the erotic cameraman looks exactly like you'd think an erotic cameraman would look like.
This is Teddy Snooker, ZaKaTV cameraman. Covering the news through all of this has been a real bitch.
The weirdest of these is the one you're most likely to get if you're attempting to follow the instruction of the tutorial, the suspense cameraman, who the credits name Dwight Murdoch, which is a little strange considering we already met Dwight Murdoch when we saw his corpse. That was Nina's boyfriend that she was waiting for at the cabin. Further muddying what this means, the new Dwight's short after credit scene is dominated by him mourning the loss of Nina, who he was apparently in love with. Like, literally nothing about it works. It's just completely wrong and weird, and I don't get it. I suppose you don't have to sit with that thought for too long, because he's shot in the head from off screen as he was about to reveal who was really behind the release of the virus. There's even a possible ending where the cameraman's only moment on screen would be him doing a spooky scary man voice and saying that this was all his doing.
It's me, see?
What this really does is reveal how malleable this story was meant to be. It's not really a solid plot structure with a specific thing to say or a resolution in mind. It is infatuated with the simulation of it all. The idea of a horror game told from the perspective of a fucked up cameraman. And the other stuff, that's just the plating. There has to be some reason for you to do the things you're doing, right? But as a wise man once said, at this point, who cares? There is some consolation in the unlockable content. Throughout the game, you find VHS tapes that aren't relevant in-game, but unlock short lore videos in the configuration menu. Well, not if you're playing the PAL version, Report from Hell. One of many things very, very wrong with this version of the game was that they somehow fucked up this menu so that you can't watch any of the videotapes. If you try to, it just takes you to the strip club level that is unlocked after you complete the game once. So once you play through that again, you come to terms with the fact that there is a lot of interesting content that's just gone. Not only gone, but it makes the whole effort of finding all the hidden tapes that are still there pointless. In the Japanese version, you can see things like the plane crashing into Lake Michigan, the event that is for some reason this game's namesake, more ZaKaTV employees being assassinated for getting too close to the truth, and strangely, the possible implication that it was Paula responsible for their deaths all along, which is somewhat substantiated by her creepy somniloquy. There is the making of something kind of fun here. But you could also make it through this whole game without ever meeting Paula. So seeing this after would be a weird, contextless clip of some woman you don't know mag dumping. What am I gonna do? Play it again to figure that out? What kind of moron would... Hey, wait a second, I did that. It is I who is the moron. Oh no, oh no.
When you see news happening, call 69 News at 610-791-1111.
Ultimately, in conclusion, at the end of the day, in the end, we're here at the end, and in summation, Michigan maintains much of the appeal of Grasshopper's other output. It's a game that is clearly reflective of its creators, a stew of their interests, down to all the characters and locations being named after pro wrestlers. Suda got his start in gaming with wrestling, lending some writing to the Super Fire Pro Wrestling series on Super Famicom, and his adoration for it persists pretty transparently. As someone that did not grow up around wrestling, I did not catch on to that. There were several moments where I thought, huh, weird name. I mean, growing up, I'd go to a friend's house and see a bunch of toys of these oddly normal-looking men, and just scratch my head. Why would I play with these toys made in the image of mostly regular-looking, if slightly embiggened, guys? None of these guys had like a red flowing cape and a skull on their crotch that vomits chains, for instance. None of these guys were a tiny boy with a red hat that fell out of my pocket long ago, leaving me with a now barren, foldable diorama of a mad scientist lab. But sure enough, if you Google any of the character names and wrestler, you're bound to find some connection to it. It's not the most fascinating of Grasshopper flourishes, but it's the sort of thing that keeps me engaged in even their titles I don't entirely care for. There is usually some unique signature to it that feels personal and not like a boardroom decision. There's a lot of reasons Michigan feels like the black sheep of Suda's gameography. And I'll be the first to admit, one of those reasons is that the story is, apart from being bleak and sort of mean-spirited, but with how much of it centers around either objectifying a woman or watching her die a horrific violent death, it's somehow near incoherent and derivative all at the same time. Unoriginal in a way I've never experienced before. And in that paradox, it somehow makes its way back to being kind of interesting. Like a lot of games that I find myself drawn to, it mishandles a great idea. Most of the best games are like the devs made a cool pair of scissors, and then immediately started running with them. Playing a character that can choose to abide by basic human decency or grin like a freak as a monster devours your coworker, it's a pulpy grindhouse attitude and theme that hadn't been explored much prior and still hasn't really since. Maybe Manhunt, in that it has a similar fascination with the grit of VHS aberration and the objective of filling them with grim, deplorable content. It's almost admirable, the poor taste of it all, but it commits to that taste inconsistently, doesn't develop it enough, and doesn't rest that on a solid framework. Possibly so you could cycle through a collection of different hot babes. That's in italics to be mocking and not reflective of my opinion. This is the kind of game I should be distancing myself from the content of more so than I actually am, but I forgot to do that in more places. Make no mistake, Michigan is a funny game, and to a degree was meant to be funny and raunchy. There is a wealth of quotable weird shit in it.
When I was a kid, I wanted to live in a house with a big refrigerator like this. One filled with tons of ice cream. Look at this picture of you. You look weird.
Well, it's also hard to ignore that it is sort of carried by how massacred it was by its English dubbing. This severely muddies my read of it. Where do I laugh with it, and where do I laugh at it? I suppose either way, I'm laughing, and there simply isn't enough laughter in this world. Cherish this moment, for it too shall fade. Michigan's gameplay, or rather the idea of its gameplay, is the most innovative thing about it, making the player character a director, a third party to the main characters that simply points out marks for others to stand on, is potentially really interesting, especially once these characters are put in danger and could potentially die based on your instruction, lack of instruction, or your indifference to their safety, which only further feeds into the dark, voyeuristic nature of the game. I wouldn't even say there's a great reward or benefit for turning your feelings off. It's not like there are upgrades or points or new abilities unlocked. It's just funnier if you do. Every level kind of plays out like a cutscene with a few different flags and branching paths to be mindful of, as well as opportunities to capture a certain kind of footage. As the cameraman, you can only really do two things other than hold the camera. You can tag something for your reporter to investigate, and you can perform a shove, which doesn't come up all that often, so I would encourage you to find other uses for it.
What is that thing? We've got to find Anne. I bet she's hiding around here somewhere. She wouldn't take off and leave her crew behind.
Like ramming Briscoe out of the way when he just annoyingly hovers around you and gets in your shot. Not that you're punished for that, which is kind of a shame. There are a lot of simple ways you could add depth or realism to this idea that just weren't really considered. I'd love it if I had to worry about my sound guy disrupting a news piece. Maybe add a button so I could yell boom in the shot so he would back up and I would get more credit for a clear, focused, well-framed shot or something. I need my time and money wasted going to school for film to amount to something. Let my film head flag fly. But I could have the camera pointed at Briscoe's fucking face while our reporter is reporting, and that's just as valid. I don't get it. Fatal Frame knew this. Pokemon Snap knew this. Dead Rising would come to know it. It just seems like an obvious challenge with professions that involve cameras. Like, am I fucking crazy here? You gotta have the thing artfully placed in the box. As your reporter walks around, there are markers on the floor signifying where she'll stop and what she'll do when she stops. If it's red, she'll wait there until you start filming her because she's going to continue the story. If it's blue, it means she's stopped temporarily and there is a brief opportunity to investigate something missable. So if she's stopped at a blue marker and you don't tag, say, a nearby door in time, she'll simply walk past it and won't acknowledge it from here forward. There's also a green one and a white one, but I don't know what that does, so who gives a shit. Aside from one sequence, you don't really go off on your own to do anything. The cameraman is helpless without a reporter, and a reporter couldn't tie their own shoes if it weren't for the cameraman. There are a handful of moments that I could charitably describe as item-based puzzles, but really it's more like trying to pantomime to two aliens how basic objects function together. The fact that you don't talk also makes doing this seem really condescending.
Huh? There's something on top of the shelves. I wonder what it is. I can't tell from here. Oh, a stepladder. They must use it for getting books down from the top shelves. I think I can use it to get what we saw on top of the shelves.
What's that? There's something on top of the armoire.
But it's way too high. We'll never reach it.
If we use this,
we'll be able to see the top of the armoire.
Yeah, why don't you give it a shot, huh? It's a weird system that doesn't always make much sense. Like, why can't you just open a door if you wanted to? Weirdly, when you motion for your reporter to open a door, she doesn't step through it. She just holds it open, and then you're allowed to decide if you actually want to go in the room or not. I have to believe this is some sort of holdover from a previous build where this mattered at all. But as it stands, it's just a pointless extra button push, and then every once in a while something funny would result from it.
It opened!
You know what, guys? Maybe we skip this one. Maybe we take 10, get some lunch. This ability to peek through a door that's slightly ajar before deciding to step through it would see a lot of use in the years to come, and in much better games. And much better games than the one I'm currently showing. But I could not remember another one on short notice. At the top of your camera overlays a time code that is technically not just for show, but also not in a way I'd imagine you'd ever have to worry your pretty little head about. It denotes how much tape you have left. You're given like 30 minutes at the start of most levels, but this doesn't mean that if you run out of tape, you'll fail the level, or your camera will just go black and you'll have to complete the level based on sound cues. It just means that you won't be able to acquire the 3 types of points in the game: suspense, erotic, and immoral. When you're filming with tape, and what you're pointing at is just the scene playing out like normal, you're probably pushing this meter closer to suspense. If you choose to film in a manner that would make your footage at best unusable and at worst material evidence in a lawsuit, you'll probably be collecting erotic points. You can also collect immoral points by filming people in danger instead of helping them. This creates a weird evil bar that begins to spread from the middle of the screen. I found it to be an interesting insight into the mind of the developers that they usually show what happens to someone when you don't help them, but then don't give a shit to show you helping them. And most of the time, if you do help them, they don't seem all that happy. Like they too understand that yes, a life has been spared from gruesome death, but also a little boring, right?
I lost my ID card. Oh well, whatever.
The real problem with this system is that it isn't really much of a system. It doesn't take an industry veteran to piece together how moral choices could be implemented in a video game. Why do you want choice in an adventure game? You want to feel some measure of cause and effect. You want to feel like choosing to save someone or letting them die did anything. Here's how you fix this. There's a part where you find a guy that's super sad because his wife died and he's just crying in his bathtub and he's about to eat a big sandwich. If you choose to say, hey, don't do that, actually they don't even show what you do to stop him. So let's start by showing that something, anything. It could be you holding up a picture of like a big old fucking pizza, and he's like, oh, never mind, I see now that there's plenty to live for. So now that you've saved him, you're gonna have a couple hours of gaming in between the payoff, so you kind of forget about this guy, and then there can be a part where like a big monster attacks you. You've got nothing but piss and rocks, and you're all out of piss, when suddenly a shot rings out. Oh, hell yeah. I'm glad I stopped that dude from eating a big sandwich. You know what I mean? It's the dog and the bear trap. And just to be clear, this is what actually happens when you save that guy's life.
What am I going to do now? I can't go on living anymore.
Oh, hell yeah! Michigan is well within the blast radius of my favorite era of video games, when they were most formative and solidified my appreciation for this deeply flawed and still young medium. An era of excess, absurdity, and edge-seeking, which I can freely acknowledge was also at its rock bottom as far as questionable content. This was gaming at its least inclusive, least showered, and most vile. My appreciation for which is colored by satire and cynicism. I do find humor in the idea that a bunch of game devs wanted their innovative found footage horror game to include out-and-out horny gameplay that amounted to zooming in on low poly blouses, and to some degree, it does pair somewhat appropriately with its sardonic take on the news business.
Yes, it's horrible what happened to Pamela, but what else could we do?
There's a logic gap there, I think. I'm not too certain how this sort of thing would render in reality. Like, a news station isn't going to air this. I guess the concept would work better if you did it set in modern day and concerning live streaming, and your scoring system was a stand-in for audience engagement or something. But I can only imagine the cameraman being like,
"What a great angle." Fast forward through this.
You got a really dirty line.
Keep going, keep going.
It's of course in horrendous taste, and would very reasonably put a large number of people off from ever playing it, especially because, well, it seems like the women in the game don't want you to be doing that.
You sick bastard!
As fitting as it may be for your cameraman to be a creepy sex pest on top of an unfeeling gorehound, it doesn't actually benefit you enough for its inclusion to not be primarily for, you know. It's that weird and sometimes worse realm of smut that's not graphic or obscene, but just specifically pervy. There's not much deeper to it than, bro, look. All along the way, I kept thinking that even if I were to take these aspects of the game into a second draft, there are so many ways you could better gamify it. It just makes sense to me that this is unusable footage within the world of local news reporting. And while maybe you could be tempted to look at something through camera eyes, such as, you know, cleavage or a flaming dead body, you can't put that on the news. Well, sometimes you can, like for, like stochastic terrorism purposes. So I don't know, maybe this game needed Xbox Kinect integration and like a taser attached to it, but I'm just like an ideas guy. I think 505 Game Street shared whatever interest the boys at Spike and Grasshopper shared, because the same year that Michigan was repackaged as Report from Hell, another camera kink game called The Camera Boy was repackaged by 505 as Paparazzi, though that title is unabashedly barely functioning shovelware and also has nothing to do with being a paparazzo. You're just a guy with a camera that shows up at photo shoots along with his photographer friend. I mean, I didn't play it, I don't know. This isn't my footage. I took this footage from, I downloaded it from leetx.to. It's like, it's not like it would be a problem if I needed to record footage of a game because I brought it up and it was relevant to the conversation. 505 localized and published a ton of games, so if it was just Michigan, I wouldn't have had a second thought about them. But if you put two of these things right next to each other, that's dangerously close to a pattern. As commendable as the rough outline of Michigan's gameplay is, I don't think it ever reaches whatever potential's there. This is a great starting point for something that could have had a lot more thought put into it. Most aspects of Michigan feel like a first draft that didn't have time to become cohesive. The only moments that feel like genuine attempts to unsettle or just jump scare you when it remembers this is a horror premise, it's utilizing creatures and phenomena that are unexplained and incongruous with the whole virus body horror business at the center. All its best scares come with a residual, what was that? The only tangible way the points affect you is that they may change your ending. But bear in mind, all the endings are like 30 seconds long and all end the same. It's like it changes the ending, but it doesn't change what the ending is. It's different, technically, in that it's not the same, but the result is unchanged. The same thing happens. You know what? Why don't you play? What does for sure change is the bizarre way they read you in the end credits. I mean, I guess. How do you figure that? Okay, that's fine. No, this game wants you to play it over and over again and unlock new outfits for your reporters, and while, yes, I did this, it was purely to experience the game in its entirety. I was not compelled to play it more than once. If anything, it became progressively more boring, and I found myself skipping many of the long conversations you have to sit through. When you start doing that, you realize just how little meat there is. There's like under 3 hours worth of meat, which would be far too much meat in any other context.
Jesus, what the hell's that smell?
There's a dead rat in the corner.
No! Fuck this movie. You introduce a rat and then kill it off screen?
Which one is this?
Spotlight.
Does it have something to do with rats?
Well, not anymore. Oh my god, this is it. Hello?
Greetings, reprobate. As you know, the holiday man is near. Ascension is near. Each household will be allotted one gift from the holiday man. At the tone, you will have 5 seconds to describe your desired gift. If you fail to articulate the nature of the gift, or your request is unacceptable, then you will be put in the device. If you repeat a gift request or ask for nothing, you will be put in the device. Praise be unto him, praise be unto holiday man. Prepare to speak, request in 5, 4, 3, 2.
I would like Prey 2 for the Xbox. Oh! What's happening?
Perhaps some kind of EMP discharge due to your poorly wired bush.
Entering power conservation mode. Whoa, I sound weird now.
I don't know if they heard my request. They're gonna put me in the device. Who's that? Michigan is far from the best looking game from 2004, looking a bit like a holdover from a few years prior. It does have its charms though, and somewhat apes a key visual that made games like Silent Hill 2 so atmospheric despite limitations. The ever-present fog, which looks actually fantastic in the Japanese version at least, does a great job of obscuring relatively barren environments, draping drab hallways in a sickly layer of gloom. A few of the smaller areas that actually require you to take your time scrutinizing, like the pawn shop and convenience store, are packed with neat little details. Shelves cluttered with junk, walls covered in flyers and posters. I also think that most of the creature design on display is actually so effectively gross and creepy that it's almost ill-fitting. They would be right at home in a proper survival horror game, but given that you're never really in danger and all of them just kind of lumber towards your reporter in slow motion, so you have time to tell them to shoot it, they feel kind of wasted. It's an inconsistent visual charm, but it certainly has its moments. On the other end, cutscenes are compressed and awkward looking, character models are detailed enough and move rather fluidly, but animations are repeated really transparently and cheaply, and lip syncing was abandoned in favor of rhythmic mouth flaps. Both of these things become very apparent whenever a character enters a monologue and they just loop the same movement over and over again. Many of the game's shortcomings are not so much masked, but alleviated by how much thought was put into the visuals associated with the video camera. They may not have done a lot to integrate it into gameplay, but the devotion to making the player feel like they are a camera is quite enjoyable. We see ourselves tumbling down a flight of stairs, splattered with blood and slugs, and set on the ground and picked back up as our cameraman runs off to do something that might have been too hard to animate. I don't think there's a second of this game where we leave the perspective of the camera. And anytime something happens when you're not rolling, you don't see anything. See, most of the things I found memorable about my experience were sort of microscopic and weird, a little quirk, a little cog in the strange machinery of Michigan. Some of these funny little details can only be properly explored from the subterranean confines of the Red Roundup! What's up, Rat Nation? A formerly independent satellite state of the greater Goth Gamer Nation, Michigan is a game sorely lacking critters of any denomination. We get neither a crow nor indeed an American pigeon throughout the 4 to 20 hours you may or may not spend playing this game, though I would of course always prefer that rat representation be consistent. In this case, there are a full 2 instances where that drought is allayed by a quality rat interaction. Ordinarily, this lack of rat content would infuriate me. I'd whip my headphones off like a frisbee, breaking a window. I'd then proceed to shout from that window. I'd yell, "Rat! Rat! Rat!" But it's the consideration behind these moments that causes my unmanaged rage to stay its grisly hand. The first instance of rat occurs the first time you visit the ZaKaTV offices. One waits patiently for you to notice it before scurrying off through a doorway with our mute cameraman confirming, a rat. The second occurs appropriately at ZaKaTV headquarters. In the reception area that leads to the chief's office, you can find a PC workstation that seems inconspicuous at first glance until you realize there's a rat where a mouse ought to be. Pointing this out to nobody but yourself causes the little guy to bolt to his little cartoon hidey hole after a dramatic roll to the floor. I know you may be thinking, this is not enough rat content to warrant this positive a reaction. And if I were to respond to this scenario I've dreamt up, I'd say, hey, maybe that's indicative of how desperately I was searching for joy in my time playing Michigan. That a dozen wrongs were undone seeing that they cared to implement and animate this entirely skippable, missable rat moment that means nothing. Changes nothing, yet changes everything. So, all things considered, I'd give the Rats of Michigan my highest Rat Roundup rating. Good! Sound design can often be the underdog of game design. Hugely important, can tip the scales of game feel one way or another, achieve a desired atmosphere, or destroy it. If a gun doesn't kerplow in the right way, or if a door doesn't cha-chung in a satisfying way, you feel it. Surprisingly, I often found myself surprised by some of the... Come on, me. I'm disappointed in you. I found myself surprised by some of the unique and immersive sound effects that, despite likely being pulled from some kind of sound library, still felt well chosen. For example, a particular sound is produced in life when you're roughly handling a video camera. You can hear its plastic shell sort of crackling and squeaking. I don't even know what the correct word to describe what it's doing, which makes it all the more neat that they captured it pretty well, be it bespoke or not. Some noises I just never tire of hearing, like, or what about, and who could forget?
Son, this is your father. I just want you to know that I am proud of all you've accomplished with your YouTube channel. Oh, if you were wondering where I've been, about 10 years ago I was locked in a makeshift prison, not unlike the film Old Boy. Ha, yes, well, it took me a while, but I trained myself in a sloppy but effective brand of martial arts and was able to escape captivity. The only thing is, I've been receiving messages from my mysterious captors. They've been taunting me, pushing me to unravel a greater mystery. So anyway, that's where I was.
Sure is, or would be, great. What I honed in on was the small stuff that's by nature not in the spotlight. The sound of walking and thumping around on floors above you or several yards ahead somewhere. Or just the fact that they bothered to have consistent room tone throughout the whole game. I'm just getting tired of talking. Game.
Huh? The door opened all by itself.
I mean, it's a studio that had not done a proper 3D game, let alone a horror game before, so it would be easy to goof most of the stuff. That's not to say there aren't plenty of both goofy and overused sounds that were probably ripped from a Halloween sound effects compact disc. A lot of this is showcased during the interstitial journal cutscenes. These bits can be kinda long, and I found myself following along, perfectly fine with it. I mean, there is a terrible dub that's announcing every step as well, so that helps.
Here it is. This is my car. Come on, get in. Let's get back to the lodge. Briscoe is waiting for us.
If there's one thing that's consistent throughout the whole game, it's the soundtrack. It was composed by Masafumi Takada, and it's played almost entirely straight. Like, if there is one guy that didn't seem to get the memo about the tone of this game, it was this guy. The primarily piano-driven score is somber and wistful a lot of the time, especially for moments that have your crew searching through wreckage and bodies for leads, or arguing about what to do next. A couple tracks have an almost Yamaoka-esque repetitive industrial clanking rhythm, These usually crop up appropriately during boss fights or when your reporter is in danger. My only problem with it was that every now and then the music would get stuck looping one part, like as a bug, not on purpose, because it was usually the last couple seconds of the track. But it's okay, I can put up with a lot. Why would I start enjoying myself now? Really, it's all very well done. I don't think I'd go out of my way to listen to it anytime soon, but it's perfectly good music for a scary game. And I suppose it's a bit of a shame that that isn't exactly what Michigan is. It's doing everything it can to treat the subject matter seriously and with the appropriate palette of sounds, but I don't know if it's enough to overpower the weapons-grade schlock of its writing and performances.
Die here, and the monsters will have you in no time.
Which I suppose I should talk about, because it's easy to just say, you know, the voice actors are not very talented, and additionally, they probably had no reference for the context of any of this dialogue, and I'm sure there was some spotty translation happening as well. But between you and me, at least as far as Greg Irwin's turn as Jean-Philippe Briscoe goes, I think this guy was putting more into this performance than a lot of established, celebrated voice actors. He was swinging wide with an instrument he had never swung before.
Carly! Carly! Oh my God! Paula! Paula! Oh my God! Oh my God! Oh my God!
And the result is like a pinball, manically hitting weird, bad, embarrassing, and captivating. I wouldn't go as far as to say it's good. Well, I like pushing boundaries though, so watch me. It's good. This same quality can be found in the voice acting of a few other characters, but none of them are trying quite that hard. It's painfully apparent how much bigger Irwin wants to go in scenes like this one, where both he and our reporter are meant to scream at a dead body falling out of a locker. I think you'll agree one of them is channeling something the other ain't.
What was a dead body doing in there?
He doesn't have very many other credits, but in looking up at least one of them, I think this is kind of the only guy he can do. Not to diminish how great a guy that is, but let's just say it's not exactly a night and day difference.
Silence, Elf! I don't remember asking you.
You know, I'll admit it, cutting to Alf was a desperate, flailing attempt to get a few nose exhales, and I didn't really think about it beyond cut to Alf, haha, funny, roll on snare drum, but I've been on a real journalism kick, and I've been seeing patterns everywhere. I think I've got something big. I think I've successfully found a link between Alf and Michigan. Now, having the attention span of a goldfish, I naturally went to cut that 3-second clip of Alf and wound up watching more than one episode of Alf. And I've realized the opening sequence may very well have been the true inspiration for many of the themes covered in Michigan. Coincidence? Here's a hint. No. Oh, also, Alf managed to figure out how to operate a door with one hand while holding the camera with another, and he's like a big dumb space rat, so really there is no excusing that. Having said that, it is sort of ironic that one of Briscoe's first big scenes where he has to really act is him drunkenly being unable to perform a song at a piano, when outside of the game industry and a world away, Greg Irwin is known for translating traditional Japanese songs into English and performing them, something he describes in his website as his life's work.
Near the river in the spring, beautiful as the sun.
It's actually very impressive and interesting to see someone else's passion brought to life. even if I can't unsee it coming from Briscoe's flappy mouth. When you get the rundown of his career, it makes a lot more sense how he wound up voice acting in the obscure port of a degenerate horror game from an eccentric creator's studio. His love for Japanese culture led to his voice making its way to just about every medium that requires it, from radio to anime, down to pre-recorded supermarket and elevator announcements. Maybe I've just been staring at his many headshots for too long, but in retrospect it kind of sounds like he's always smiling. You know how you can just hear a smile in someone's speech? And I guess it's up to you to determine if that's heartwarming or sinister.
皆さんこんにちは。バイリンガル司会のグレッグ・アーウィンと申します。
People tend to absolve games of their perceived flaws when they're tied to a creator they admire, deifying them to a position where they can do no wrong, where their word is gospel, and thus he spake. But once you recognize the secret reason for her exposure, you will feel ashamed of your words and deeds. In combing through the admittedly sparse, modern reviews for Michigan, I can see a bit of this phenomenon in action. Rather than be discarded as heretical teachings, it's welcomed into canon thanks to Suda's revised place in the pantheon of auteur game designers. Just like actual religious volumes, these works are in part beautiful and strange, and more often than not, a kaleidoscopic lens into the author's kinks and taste in movies, and it's up to you to choose which passages you want to ignore. I've come across more than one forum or Reddit post about how much we need an HD remaster of Michigan. After playing through this game several times in a row, I feel like I can confidently say that I don't think that's necessary at all. I mean, sure, it would be great if it was made available in some form outside of buying a $500 copy off eBay. That same could be said for hundreds of games. But that sounds like a waste of resources when what does interest me is seeing the Michigan that Suda seems to think it could have been. Maybe may have been if he wasn't the absentee father of this one, because I do think it's an idea that still holds a lot of potential. Specifically, and I don't know if this is even the part he would care about, the idea of a group of characters that are intentionally in a horror movie situation for completely selfish reasons, for fame and profit, for the scoop, like supernatural horror storm chasers, running into the eye of an outbreak they can't hope to fully understand. The Michigan we got is an amusing vertical slice of this, but with nothing quite what it should be, and confidently clinging to some of the more egregious mid-2000s stinky boy content. It's one thing to include a sexy lady character, or put overactive jiggle physics on things, but to make me an active participant in your thing? I don't know, man. Kinda weird when I'm out here just trying to make snuff films. For such an ambitious premise, it doesn't seem to be trying very hard to reach it. Its plot unravels in disconnected, meandering vignettes that have no sense of momentum or progress until a pop is heard in the projector and the film spins to a seemingly random stop. I can find value in the amusingly disposable way it treats the cast of characters, the openly stupid or cynical choices they make, and play straight-faced.
That explains it. That smell wasn't this toilet, it was a dead body.
There is something particularly fucked up about seeing a woman being eaten by an eldritch horror and being asked, do you want to keep filming this? Not, do you want to try to save her or try to fight the monster? It's simply, how long do you want to watch this? Ready, Fazbear? I thought you weren't allowed to leave the pizzeria. What time is it?
Charging in progress. Please, Shuddy.
Oh, that's right. Well, the sun is up, so that can't be good. What? No way. Good enough, Holiday Man. Good enough. That's the end of the video. The video's over. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed the video, please consider liking or commenting or subscribing or supporting me on Patreon or I don't know. doing a little dance for me. So, if it wasn't obvious to you, I also sounded sick in this one as well. And the reason for that is I got sick again the exact same time as I did the previous month. And it once again happened shortly after I had deigned to touch grass. Lesson learned. Not touching that anymore. Anyway, hope you're doing okay. Hope you've gotten your call from Holiday Man's representative. Thanks one more time for watching the video. And an extra special thanks to Ailing Uncle, 2Password for Kids, Aaron Kwolik, Agendine, Alexander Smith, Anarcho Himbo, Andre Perkins, Aparts89, Apepex, Bayard Brown, Beef Lightning, Ben Carnell, Ben Oliver, Big Abuela Energy, Black Pluto, Bolt Action Baja Blast, Close Quarter Wombat, Cole, D-Sky, Dante de Glanville, Daphne Pittendry, Dark Raptor 86, Darkside Blues, The Illuminati, Der Capitan, The Real Michael King. Despite my own misgivings, I should feel proud of how far I've come and give myself a gentle but firm piss missile waxing, Devour, Dirt Person, Dr. Beard, Dos Days, Dubby, Dwellin' with Darhaku, Edgy, Edward Avila, Fart Mother, Gamma, Garbage Day, Grok, Gunmancer, High Food Court, Ludexa Alexander, Jack the Dave, Jared Bynum, Jay Alameen, Joseph Zanoni, Just Reshef, Carrot, Kafwin Amygdala, Labor Delenda Est, Marcy Bones, Massimar, Michael Schmidt, Morg D. Trius, Nekot the Brave, Octo, Ona Hill, Philip Woolley, Rahul Kirthi, Roland, Saiko Gekido, Salvatore Tosti, Samuel Vanderplatz, Schlongva, Slaurak, Snapplefish, Zovil Fuch, Zovil Abaglabe wo dem Wiedengras Hamentier, Solko, Stephen Kick, Sugarboo, Tech923, Tessian, This Deal is Getting Better All the Time, Two Stan, Where Am I? Help, Witless Moth, Worm, Zach Bishop, Alfred Correa, Board Loki, Claire Owen, Daniel Streb, El Jaguar, Eto, Avanerve, Giraffa. I'm really trying to think of a funny name involving goblins. Jeremy Silver, June Choi, Karen Rosenau, Catherine Graven, Klex, Lore, Lord Papula, Mr. Alpacleton, Savvy Fave, Swoot Operator, T-Dog, 8083, 410,757,864,530 gay cops, A Hanging Chad, Albert Hunley, Alex Fisher, Aaron Isaias, Back to Bed, Bang Flang, Binary Vision, Brady the Sanity Tax Collector, Brozoof Jones, Cantankerous, Chimichanga Jones, Kodamite, Daddy Reznor, David Offord, Derforzi, Drunken Badger, Fiona Summers, Fix My Brain, Grounded Valkyrie, James Andrew Perla Adams, James Snipes, Jay Kenny, Jetson Jempel, Nyawang Lapsang Yeshe Tenzin Gatso, J-Man DX, La Rodica, The News Elf, Mad Monty 98, Make It Raynor, Ophelia Fishwife, P. Dizzle, Persian Air, Please Stop Treating Player Agency as a negative. Leaning left-right manually isn't a fucking cover system, it's basic movement. Raul Garcia, Robert Brandon, Rowdy Roddy Peeper, Royale with Cheese, Samuel Ward, Sonder Baum, Sorry I'm No Hero, Technica, T. Stoney, 10-Beat, The Angry Pebble, The Condroid. There are other worlds than this. Two Legs. A Big Gay Rat, Alistair Stewart, Alexander Olbrich, Alex F, Ali G, Alistair Grout, All the Nope, Andrew Light, Andrew Lubrano, Andy Krieger, Arbiter Numbers, Ashley Hillsman, Astro Shepherd, Atari Steed, Oscilla, Auspicious Whiskers, Babylon Broken, B-Top, Beef, Ben and Kara Dowling, Benjamin Payne, Best Tiger, Big Uggy Boy Dum Dum, Bindle, Bishy 98, Biddles 99999999999999999. I feel like there are more nines now. Bivdub, Bloodworth, Blake, Bohemian Nobody, Brams, Brandon Frost, Brett Weaver, Buckshot Papaya, Burps Wimbledon, Béranger, Jean-Louis Bernard Jacquemin I. I think. Yeah, it's like both of us couldn't really make heads or tails of that one. Oh well. Casey, Cerberus Arms, Colby, Captain Jax, Cult of Lita, Dapney, David Fromke, David Harpstrite, Dazed Clockwork, Denny J.A., Destriga, Divana Upperock, Dirty Space Rat. Do Futa Cummies taste like poggers? I think I preferred the previous one. Doc Parian, Dog Vomit Slime Mold, Dongs.exe, Dr. Grimbeard's Dino Nuggy Suppository Surprise, Eben Hollub, Eben Sullivan, Es tut mir leid, dass es so weit gekommen ist. Ethan Blue, Eudiptes, Every Day, Once a Day, Give Yourself a Putty. Eyeballzilla, 15 gargantuan low poly rats listening to Jungle. I feel like I've seen that one. Flame, 5029, Neo8, Fried Potato, Frolics with Bunnies, Fuzzy Tingle Times, Game is Good, Game in Watching You, Gamerwood, General Clizara, Ghoul Baby Bond, Goofy Touched Me, Grimbeard Stole My Credit Card, Grimbeard's My Big Baby Boy, Haley Bobella, Heywood Jablomi, Hentai McToon Boob, High Res Titan, Hime Rowan, Hitoshi-san.
Hold on, those my shoes.
Holy House Profane Void, Horror Show 93, Hugo Upton, Huron Lockhart, I Am Without Meaning, It Is Gilgamesh, Mightiest of Nappers, Who Patreons Through Me, I Fart on My Hands, I Swear I Didn't Make This Just to Sub to Grimbeard, INTJ Loves Her INTP, Irish Wristwatch, Irish Wristwatch, Irish Wristwatch, James Kelly, Jamie Faulkner, Jeff Ladd, Jesse James, Joshua, Joshua David, Justin Darnell, Captain Ketchup, Carragera, Kieran Walker, Kelly O'Neill, Kevin Hale, Kid Charlemagne, The FCC Can't Catch Me, Kind Raccoon, Crust Easy, Kurok the Famished One, Lori Kubri, Leland Miliokis, Leopold Gloom, Legendary Dragon, M, Magic Meows, Mandalore Gaming, Mango Roxas, Marquois, Matthew St. J, Max Cohen, Miku, Mioang, Micah J. Best, Miles Phillips. Fuck. More Sharks, Mother Destruction, Mr. Ducky Quack, Mystical Lint, Name Requires DLC, Nex42, Nick Hill, Nick Hooper, Nick Timmons, Nikki Paradise, Nicholas Polestar, No Curly Fries in Hell, Noel M, Nuclear Sun, Noel Rom, Oliver Marshall, Opichi Kostra, Origami Zergling, Palanquin Noble, Paranoid Vampire, Parapug deserves a tiny blanket that says, Hi, I'm Egg, Pathetically Hopeful, Paul Blart Mulgoth, Paul Fierce, Pazuzu, Philip Coffee, Picture, Radia, Replicant, Ruibisomem, Scofflaw, The Sussiest Baka D, Sentient Turtle, Shadanon, Shade, Stilatixo, Soy Flowers, Spooky Schaefer, Startide, Sunshine, Team R, Tegan, The Supervisor, Thick Vormom, Tripwire, Tucker Donovan, Tutant Mean-Aged Needle Teedle, Vincent Cronin, WESTFU and Play, Wolf Chalice Logician, Wudgie, Zanga PF, Zdianek Benez, Zen, Ziwawe, Zagingu, Zombie Fever, and Zuli, the Little Blue Kobold, for being a patron, and the rest. I thank you so much, all of you. You're keeping this channel alive, and you're providing me with the basic necessities of life. I'm trying to think of some gaming updates. I just finished Metro Exodus and the 2 DLC, which was kind of mediocre, to be honest. I don't know, like I already have mixed feelings about like a, mute protagonist. That's kind of a divisive thing I've noticed. I don't know, I guess others find it sort of immersion breaking. But it's also just immersion breaking to me when like people are fucking talking to you and you're not saying anything. Like for that whole game, that dude's wife is like coughing her lungs out with TB or some shit. And he just never talks to her. I'm sorry, Anna. I must wait until loading screen. We got out of Vladivostok just in time. Any longer and those mutants would have eaten our ass. It's a super cool, world in that it's like a proto-pseudo-stalker, but like, I feel like they're straying from what made the other ones work. Especially with the DLC where you're just like, an American from my city? Hell yeah, brother. I was in Moscow when the shit hit the fan. Then I lived in the metro for 20 years, and I became a bona fide Russian. I don't get it. Was that pandering to me? I don't know. Weird shit. Games are weird. It's a weird business. I hope you have a good one. And hey, I'll fucking see you next year, man.
A little longer.
guess around here, Alf is loved.